Here's Chris Schmidt.
Welcome to it. Great to be with you on a Thursday. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, ready to get rolling on this Thursday. Numbers to dial up, 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Give us a follow. Find us on Twitter, Chris Schmidt at Schmidt_radio. And at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel. This will be posted on the video portion of Hail Varsity on YouTube. So check the show out that way. You can find us on the podcast, Hail Varsity Radio, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and can always email the show, Chris at hailvarsity.com. We'll tackle the offensive line with Jeremiah Searles in 1 hour. Gary Barnett will talk quarterback coaching, what Coach Whipple's going through right now, trying to figure out how to calm who is got the job to lose right now, and Casey Thompson, Chubba Pretty. What's the approach? What buttons do you push? So we'll check in with Barney on that next hour. And Danny Burke, some early odds out, researched and found by one Elijah Herbel. Numbers we'll dive into, some early lines on the Big Red all throughout the schedule. Brandon Vogel with us in 20 minutes from Hail Varsity. We'll check in with Vogue's good column by him with the Nebraska defense. They need to replenish some of those lost names. Big scrimmage Sunday for the Nebraska football team as they're off today. And we will also get you a Northwestern Nebraska preview. What is out already? And it is done by College Football News. Elijah, what do you know? How's your day?
Day is not too bad. Looking forward to getting this show knocked out. I think we got a good one planned. And one thing I'll say is, for those of you that are catching this on the Hail Varsity YouTube page, we are recording this live, and there's a slight delay, very tiny, between the camera and the mics.
So it looks like a kung fu film.
No, it looks fine.
Okay.
But it looks like I have absolutely no sense of rhythm whenever we come back from breaks. And, it's whatever good song it is, I'm bobbing my head. It looks like I have no sense of rhythm. So if you're catching us in video form,
it looks like it, huh?
Bear with me. My sense of, I was in band, I was in choir growing up. My sense of rhythm is not as white as I look.
Can you move is the question.
Can I dance? Hell no.
Okay. So
I got two left.
Let's just not lie to people about being in rhythm.
I got rhythm. I don't have enough flexibility to dance. That's my problem. And
there we go.
I was even in dancing choirs and whatnot growing up, but it never translated.
You're a better man than I.
Can't dance, can't sing?
Neither. And I do the world a favor by abstaining from both. So let's dive into this Nebraska-Northwestern prediction and preview from College Football News. And it asks, the simple question, but it's accurate. What has changed with each of these programs over the last several months? Last time you saw Nebraska, it was the feel-good win of 2021. It was the quite arguably best win from a optics standpoint for the Frost era. I always go back to that Snow Bowl game against Sparty, where it was 9-6 in true Big Ten November fashion. I think it was November. Sorry. But anywho, that was a gutted out win against a grumpy Spartan team.
Can confirm that was a November game because I was working for Husker Vision at the time and running the cameras outside in November.
So you were freezing.
It was brutal.
It was cold. So 56-7 was impressive by Nebraska last year. What was most impressive to me wasn't Nebraska's big plays or the way the defense stood out, but it was the response, because that was right after the Michigan State flub in East Lansing. All week long a year ago, how's Nebraska going to respond? What type of character can they show, will they show after having their hearts ripped out? By that point, they were used to seeing teams take their heart out and put it out like it's a Marlboro Red. They did their job. They played well, got big plays. It was good. Looking ahead right now, Northwestern's lines of scrimmage. Northwestern on the defensive side, a couple of names to look at. Peter Skoronski, the left tackle, the next first-round pick, likely for Northwestern. And that's what you know and feel like you know about Northwestern coming into this week 0 game. Helinski at quarterback, is he going to be able to settle in? He's had time to sit and groom. Is he another Clayton Thorson, or is he another Band-Aid until Fitz gets his next quarterback? For Nebraska, there's a lot of prove-it factor with all the transfers, and Nebraska has new quarterback or quarterbacks. You have some question marks on the offensive line. Feel good about the running game because of who's in that backfield. And you look at the defensive side of the ball, some guys are trying to make rosters or drafted last year. What happens with Nebraska on the defensive side of the ball? We'll get more into that with Brandon Vogel. But when it comes to college football news, they just flat out say Nebraska has more talent. Nebraska will hit a couple of big plays in the second half, and Nebraska gets gets an underappreciated win to start the season. That's where they're going here a couple of weeks before kickoff. I can totally talk myself into that. I don't know that I'm feeling the 12.5 to lay that point total with all the newness with Nebraska. And I do think the college football news preview with Nebraska-Northwestern is 1,000% accurate. Don't expect anything pretty, because if there's one thing about Northwestern games, they are great at making it ugly. That's how they win. And if it's too low a scoring, that's absolutely in Northwestern's favor. It's got to be 28 to 30 point number. Nebraska's offense has got to get that, or they got to out Northwestern, and that's be sound, not turn the football over, and just be better defensively and keep them out of the end zone. I think Nebraska's defense can do it. We're way ahead of ourselves yet, but this was an interesting article that popped up I wanted to touch on because the points are valid. Nebraska's had more talent than most of the opponents they faced in the West, and they've been able to go from a recruiting ranking standpoint, or at least on paper, do pretty well. Top 4 typically when it comes to recruiting in the Big Ten. But that talent's not translated to wins because they've been undercoached. And this is paramount for Nebraska to change that tune, speaking of song and dance, for 2022.
And Northwestern, I think we can expect, I'm not sure I'm comfortable enough saying they're going to be leaps and bounds in week 0 than they were last season, but they are going to be a better team than they were last season, with guys that took their lumps in the Big Ten last season, got another off season of work, and they're going to come back a little bit better. The question is can Nebraska's offense be better than next season? The defense, I think we can all expect, might take a slight step back, but if the offense can do their job better, it might help out the defense, and their stats might be a little better if they're not left on the field for, say, 50-something plays a game and have to go defend an offense on 2 different short fields or 3 different short fields based on field position. But if the offense can at least be a wash with last season, I think it means good things for Nebraska against Northwestern.
No, I don't disagree with you that I think the defense can be put in position if Northwestern's got to drive a full field, for the love of God, instead of that short field position you touched on. Yeah, I think the defense could be good enough when we're taking the Nebraska defense versus the Northwestern offense. I think the defense can be good enough to go win the game, to echo your point.
The question to me is, can the offense go put up points on a Northwestern defense, especially an offense that hasn't had a full period of time to gel like you wish they would be able
to. You have a Northwestern secondary that is no one's coming back that's picked off any passes. And that is maybe good when you look at Nebraska's skill players, the receiving core, and a guy that's experienced in case. He's got to have time to throw, though. Who's on the horn?
Let's bring in Jim here. Jim's on with Hail Varsity Radio.
Jim, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment. I think it's going to be a heck of a ball game, but and I do believe Nebraska is going to win, but it's going to be 12 points. They have
Amen.
such a new staff, and Northwestern's a pretty consistent ball club. And going overseas and everything goes along with that, and there's a lot of stuff we don't even know. But I think they're going to win. But I'd say maybe 4 to 7 points, something like that, but just because of their talent. But,
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it should be. If you're a Nebraska fan and you look at the talent comparison, Jim, you're right on. But I'm with you, man. If we're just talking about your money, my money, or Mama's money,
yeah.
I'm gonna take the points.
Well, absolutely. Because Northwestern's consistent. They really are. They're not a great ball club, but I tell you what, year to year, they're a pretty consistent ball club.
They do a hell of a job, Coach. And Jim, thanks for the phone call. Appreciate you. Can dial up, join us here. We're talking a little bit of a preview from college football news. They lay out Nebraska-Northwestern 466-3776 or 800-825-5865. Can email the show, chris@hailvarsity.com. And we're just diving in. It's a couple of weeks early, but it's all right with college football news. They're laying their take out on how this thing shakes out.
Yeah, and calls are coming fast and furious here. We got Chris on the line.
Chris, welcome in. Thanks for dialing up on Hail Varsity.
Hey, great show. No one's mentioned this really, but Casey Thompson does throw quite a few interceptions.
You think so? You had nine, but
only 261 attempts. I mean,
that's fair.
The same ratio as Adrian. Adrian had 10 and 300 and a little over 300, and Casey had 9 and 261. So
I look at the touchdown to interception ratio. It's 2-1. I'd like that. The thing that Casey doesn't do is he doesn't fumble. At least he hasn't.
But that is
in
good.
Comparison.
I was going to ask that. I always have a hard time finding the fumble stats for quarterbacks. Adrian had a big problem with the fumbling, but and Casey basically had 3 huge games where he got his like 15 or 16 touchdowns. So
they needed it.
Hopefully he has a bunch more of those huge games.
And Chris, I don't have a professional's eyes, but I have gone and done a little bit of film study in Casey and watched some of his full game, like every single throw type things that I've been able to find. And to me, it looked like whenever he did throw interceptions, it wasn't a guy making a bad decision necessarily. It was a guy who, had pressure in his face, was going down, and it made the dumb decision of throwing it as opposed to just taking your minus 7 yards. And that could be something that a new offensive scheme could curtail slightly. If the offensive coordinator can go into the game plan knowing you don't want this guy to have to do too much with his legs on, say, a 5 or 7 step drop.
Yeah, that's we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, it wasn't like a horrible amount of interceptions, but it averages out to about an interception a game because it's about 30. If you throw 30 passes a game, that's about what we're expecting to do, and that's about an interception a game. So hopefully he can cut that down in half or so.
Chris, thanks for the phone call. Appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for the shout out. 466-3776 Nebraska-Northwestern preview college football news. The other thing that we don't know with Casey Thompson is we do know that he had the best back in college football behind him in Robinson. And that dude's money. He's great. Do you have that? No. In Lincoln, do you have something that can complement him so it's not all him? That's got to happen.
And from what we've been hearing out of fall camp, I'm not necessarily concerned that Casey's a guy that isn't going to be able to deliver the ball accurately and find the right guy. The only concern I have in watching his film is that sometimes you just like to hold on to the ball too long and didn't throw the ball away and move on to the next play as much as you would have liked. And again, as I was saying to Chris, it comes down to can your offensive coordinator kind of drill that out of you and make sure he's not putting you in that position, keeping the offense in rhythm. That's my take on Casey, because he's a guy that he can make the throws. That's not going to be the problem. He's a guy I've liked his decision making too. It's just a question of almost similar to what we had from Adrian Martinez in the end, the crunch time of games last season. Is he trying to do too much at times?
He hangs in the pocket well, really climbs up, steps up in the pocket.
Great,
yeah, it's really impressive. And the thing that is different this year than last year for Casey Thompson, and listen, he's the guy that it's his job to lose. We're not anointing him yet. We're just talking about if things follow through like we think they may, and he's getting the nod and the start because of the experience, he's going to have a thumb that's not detrimental. which is good. Let's get to the phones real quick before
Tom
break.
joining us.
Tom, thanks for the call. Go ahead.
You bet. Yeah, just a quick comment. I haven't called forever, but I just wanted to say, you guys are talking about interceptions. They usually happen when our quarterbacks are running for their lives. And when Whipple said yesterday that, all the quietness on the offensive line, I'm sorry, but we have to have some badasses on the offensive line or we're going to be throwing picks. Same old story.
That pressure rate from last year, it can't be even close to this year. With what the amount of pressures and hits and sacks, Tom, thanks for the phone call, that Nebraska allowed a year ago. And you don't have a run-first dual threat guy. We'll get into that with Barnett in an hour. When it comes to quarterback run game, interested if that's gone away with a little bit of the zone read and zone option that was shown at the open part of practice yesterday. Just something for Northwestern to think about. Brandon Vogel's with us next to Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
And we're back.
Fellas, think we could listen to the radio?
On Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome!
Well, if you're a podcast fan, you got a treat. The I-80 preview dropped for the 2022 season. Its host, managing editor with Hail Varsity Magazine and .com, and author with John Cook, Dream Like a Champion, Brandon Vogel, with us. He's in his football office as we're getting this posted on YouTube, the Hail Varsity channel, at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. Vogues, happy Thursday. Good to spend time. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We are good, and we just opened up the first preview of Nebraska-Northwestern with college football news. They're leaning Nebraska, and it's because of big plays in the second half. They're more talented, and the Nebraska defense can get a couple of stops in a win that'll look better as the year goes on. How do you like that? Fact or fiction for you as you project?
I can see that being the way the game unfolds. Next week's I-80 preview podcast will be the Northwestern game preview. So over the next week, I'll really be digging into trying to figure out, how I think or how I could see that game going. But that general setup makes sense. Nebraska's offense, a lot of moving parts this offseason. Obviously, I think it's fair to expect it not to be a perfectly tuned machine right out of the gates. That said, I think, and Northwestern historically last year was a big exception. Pretty tough defense year in and year out. So I could see a pretty low scoring first half, a little bit of a defensive struggle. I think the good thing there is I feel pretty good about Nebraska's defense's ability to hang in. And that might be the Huskers' path here if they want to leave Ireland with a win. You might have to grind one out a little.
And Brandon, I think the defense is going to be huge, but looking at the three phases of the team, I wouldn't put it past the special teams to be the phase of the game where they need to step up, or this game could have some issues. I mean, you look at the fact that Nebraska's probably been losing 7 to 10 points a game with either field position or missing a field goal or what have you. Just the
don't forget safeties on punts.
Safeties on punts. I mean,
it's week zero. I mean,
people like to gloss over the special teams, and despite how bad it's been at Nebraska, it almost feels like it's getting glossed over just a little bit here in fall camp yet again in terms of the importance of the special teams needing to step up to go get a win against Northwestern.
Yeah, and if the game it does end up unfolding that way, and you've kind of got a slugfest in the first half, or maybe in both halves, that becomes huge. And for Nebraska to be a team that only made 50% of its field goals last year, it's easy to overlook how damaging that can be, especially with the way that last season went and how they lost those games. On average, teams are about 75% on field goals typically. So that's a lot of points left off the board there. In a game like this, where maybe the defenses are controlling things early on, punting becomes a big deal. So all of those pieces are pretty big. And what I hadn't thought of it until you just mentioned it, Elijah, but one of the best maybe starts to this vital year for Nebraska football could be if special teams just has a really good first half against Northwestern. I mean, boy, would that make people at least feel a little bit good, even if the score is a little too close for their liking, maybe at halftime.
So is Bush bringing in the Hollywood rainmaking equipment to prep for potential game conditions in Ireland, wet and sloppy and slippery field? I don't know if it's going to be South Bend lawn, how long that yard will be, but the folks of Ireland will be treated to a 9-6 throwback Big Ten beatdown. There's blood, there's some missing teeth, and it's an attrition thing.
Yeah, that's another thing I hadn't considered. Normally we're used to when Nebraska plays quote unquote on the road at Northwestern, grass length typically comes up. It hasn't come up yet, and maybe that's because it's in Ireland. I will say that the Irish traditionally are pretty solid with their turf management, so I feel like they'll. I feel like Nebraska will have a good surface there. Will it be dry? That's a good question. I don't know if they're gonna. It would be pretty cool to bring in like the Friday Night Lights, rain machines. Whenever Friday Night Lights would play in the rain, it was always torrential. So that'd be fun, at least from a visual perspective. But maybe they just dunk some footballs in a bucket of water and say, "Here, get these snaps and punt these."
I'm going to quickly do some research here on what type of grass is the traditional playing field surface in Ireland.
Well, it's a rugby stadium.
Yeah, but there's so many different kinds of grass out there that could be a good feature story for you, Brandon, just on the types of grass Nebraska is going to be facing this season. There's an idea for you.
It's a hell of a title. Vogues investigates grass, international grass.
On a serious note, I am kind of interested now. Like, what if they're playing on a type of grass that they've never played on before? Just a type of grass that isn't, very popular in the United States. Hadn't considered that. I'm learning a lot from you guys on this radio spot.
Wow. Vogue, you wrote about the defense today. HailVarsity.com/subscribe. Get the magazine and to get the digital piece. Wait, what?
Get this great research I did on the grass. At the Aviva Stadium in Dublin, a Irish-owned grass company installed a 95% natural grass that also has synthetic fibers inserted into the turf to help provide
hybrid.
A faster pitch recovery and better playing surface.
Very interesting. See, that's cutting edge stuff. We got a composite surface.
And just make sure you bring the right spikes, right? The appropriate spike length. Vogue, you wrote out Nebraska's defense and what was lost and what is traveling to Ireland. And, I think we've come to a consensus here the first 40 minutes of this show that the defense is going to have a good day. So far, as you navigate through camp, do you think that it's as good as advertised right now, that black shirt D?
Yeah, I would say so. I think Nebraska gave up about 23 points a game last year, and that's with all of the dumb scores that weren't even involving the defense that we all sadly remember. Realistically, they gave up about 20 points a game, which is extraordinary. Like I did not think going into last year, Nebraska going into last year, very experienced group, 5th most experienced defense in the country. So it was reasonable to expect them to make some progress. I wouldn't have guessed 20 points a game. And I wouldn't guess that they'll do better than they did a year ago in terms of keeping points off the board. For me, it's how do they stay in that range, like the 24, 25 point range. And if they do that, that should be, I would consider that a win, given what they lost on the defensive line, which I think is probably the key to this. You've got a really strong linebacker core, as strong as Nebraska's maybe had in a couple of years, in my opinion. Last year's group up front did a really good job of keeping blockers off of those guys. Can they do that again with all of the change that's happened up there? Got some change in the secondary too. That said, Travis Fisher has totally earned my trust back there. And I like the talent back there. They've got a lot of options. I think Nebraska probably gives up a few more big plays than it did a year ago, but it was top 5 in limiting those plays last year. So you've got a little bit of wiggle room there where you can go back a little bit just based on working some new players in. So I'm pretty optimistic about the defense. You know, they might slide back a little from last year, but I'm only expecting it to be a little, which I would count as a win, given how much they have to replace.
And Brandon, something we were talking about a little bit last segment was the fact that Nebraska's defense, a lot of times last year, was put into bad situations by the offense, and that kind of tended to drag down the defense as a whole in terms of numbers and how many points per game they were allowing. So does the stinginess of Nebraska's defense really matter if it's another year of Nebraska having a negative turnover differential, or are the special teams setting them up poorly?
Yeah, so, you know, I wrote about that a little in this preview, which is also the IAD preview for this week. And I look at Nebraska last year, and they were elite at limiting big plays, which was good. And they were elite at one other thing, which was limiting damage in their own territory. They gave up 2.9 points per drive inside their own 40, which was eighth best nationally. Nebraska basically had to do that because on a down by down basis, so looking at success rate, not to bore everybody with all this stuff, but on a down by down basis, they were average. They were actually a little bit worse than they had been in previous seasons. So they were giving up some yards, but they got the stops when it mattered. And that's good. It worked. They only gave up 23 points a game last year. You'll take that every season. That said, there's some risk there because if one of those drives, an extra one of those drives, say even every 2 games turns into a touchdown, all of a sudden you don't have a lot of wiggle room there. So that's kind of the key for me, I think. Last year was good. Last year, you know, it kind of through sheer will and good tackling. I think good tackling was really the key to it. Nebraska put up some really good defensive numbers. I wouldn't try to do it again just because it felt like, oh, you know, we can look at the overall record and talk about Nebraska's bad luck. Defensively, I don't want to say they were lucky because I think they put in the effort to do it, but it's just not a strategy that I would feel safe if it's like, okay, we just do this every year. We give up yards, but we make the stops when it matters.
Think about Nebraska, too, with the extra possessions. A lot of those extra possessions were the result of turnovers. Nebraska just for forever has been not good when it comes to turnover differential. You look at the Purdue game, -4 picks there. At best case, they're even, but does Nebraska score off of the defense's turnovers? Not always, right? Because of the inconsistency with field goals or their red zone inconsistency. But it was pretty good money to even money that, guess what? The defense is going to have to go on a sudden change in their own territory and hold somebody to 3 or just get a shutout. I mean, that's just it. You don't give the opposition an extra possession per game, you know, because of how tight these ball games are going to be. Vogues, real quick, what's coming up with you and Hale Varsity?
Yeah, so busy week and busy run up to the season. We'll of course have coverage from fall camp all throughout in the lead up to Ireland. As I mentioned earlier, I'll be doing that Northwestern game preview on the IAD preview podcast next week. So be sure to look for that. And then the August issue, which is our annual volleyball issue, goes to print on Monday. So we'll be busy over the weekend putting that to bed. Really excited for people to see that. We've got a great cover story from Aaron Sorensen, and it's in depth of volleyball, Big Ten volleyball preview, as you'll find from Jacob Padilla. So make sure to check for that. If you're not subscribed, it's not too late to get in and get that August issue. You can do that at halevarsity.com/subscribe.
Brandon Vogel. Vogues, thanks for the time, bud.
Thanks a lot, guys.
All right. We'll dive into some early odds. Lines are out.
Chime in 402-466-ESPN or email the show, Chris at HaleVarsity.com. Just try me. Back to Hale Varsity Radio.
Big thanks to Brandon Vogel. That'll be on the podcast, and the show will be streamed in its entirety on Hale Varsity's YouTube channel. Quick shout out to our dear friend Connor Clark. He is running the show, and Elijah's in Omaha when we're up at the Hale Varsity Club on Fridays this season for the road games. Kudos to Connor and his colleague, the college student TV winner, gold for the Nebraska Broadcasters Association. The first win of his career and live TV event. So Connor doing some work with the play-by-play thing. Him and Matt McMaster. Good work, fellas. Congrats to you. You and Connor tomorrow. Rocking and rolling.
It's now the award-winning Hail Varsity Radio. I mean, we got you, Nebraska Sportscaster of the Year. We got Connor, who won gold in the Nebraska Broadcast Association. And then we also got me.
Well, you have the mustache of the year.
Thank you. It's unofficial, but I'm expecting my trophy in the mail here at some point before the end of the season.
It is a model car of the Magnum PI Ferrari.
I'd take it. I'd take like the actual Ferrari, though.
So yeah, the '83 Ferrari was pretty good. Wasn't quite the Ferris Bueller Ferrari, but it's good.
I still think in terms of like old TV show cars, it's still kit.
You want a talking car?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
wait till you're married or have a kid, and you're getting it from both ends as far as how you drive and which route you should have taken. I don't want a talking car.
See, and that it was probably cooler before Elon Musk came out with all these Tesla cars that drive themselves and talk to you. Like maybe Kit was the inspiration for. Maybe I just need a Tesla. Maybe that's all I need.
Hey, you get one, let me know.
I prefer the good old environmentally unfriendly gas guzzlers that sound really loud whenever you drive them. That's my style.
Just go with a muscle car.
Yeah.
Right? Call Kaz up, say, Kaz, I want to get a muscle car. What should I do? And he'll point you in the right direction. Some early lines are out, and the number for Northwestern, Nebraska, 12.5. Good luck where you lead on that. North Dakota, Nebraska favored over North Dakota and Georgia Southern, respectively, minus 28.5 and minus 26.5. You'll know more where your heart or head is at after Northwestern if you want to lay heat that way. Oklahoma, Nebraska, Elijah, minus 4.5. Nebraska getting points at home against Boomer Sooner. That's the early number. Indiana, Nebraska, right there. Same line as Nebraska-Northwestern, minus 12.5. The Friday night Concern Bowl, if we're going to title it for Nick Handley, our dear friend. You have Nebraska favored on the road right now by 10.5 over Rutgers. Pick 'em for our road trip to Purdue on the 15th of November. Illinois, Nebraska's been a 15 to 17 point favorite. I think they were 10.5 last year in week 0 against the Illini. That eventually dropped down to 8.5. But Nebraska's been double-digit favorites over the Illini. They haven't covered against the Illini since 2018, and it's been since 2019 since Nebraska's won outright. For most of those times, it was against Lovey. This is round 2 against the Pig Farmer.
Yeah, and 15 is scary. I mean, I feel like 15 against...
There's no hook.
15 against Illinois is scarier than 12.5 against Northwestern to me. In terms of like Nebraska's ability to cover that number, I could see Nebraska covering 12.5 against Northwestern if they come out firing.
Couple of touchdowns. You're up 7, and then the death drive where you
get a big play from the special teams. I mean, there'd probably be an earthquake in Nebraska if Nebraska houses a punt or a kickoff return against Northwestern.
How about covers a kickoff or a punt? And I think they will, right? Bill Bush is for real. Good stuff. Heck of a coach. But you're right. I mean, you're going to have thousands of Nebraska fans over in Ireland with us, and they're going to be cheering and having a good time. But back here in the homeland, the Nebraska fans, if you just see cleaner, tighter football.
I mean, the cheers may be heard from Dublin. The cheers go down in Lincoln.
Yeah.
Then after Illinois, you got Nebraska favored by 2.5 against Minnesota.
Good. They've been favored or right there a lot of years against Minnesota. What was the line? The COVID game?
Oh, when Minnesota brought like 50
Yeah,
guys
they needed the small bus, not the giant stagecoach bus that seats like 90.
Mm-hmm.
They could have got away with half of an aisle because everyone in Minnesota had COVID, and they still came in and won.
I don't know off the top of my head, but something says Nebraska was favored by double digits there.
They weren't favored last year, were they? They might have been, like by a 1 or 2 points or a pick 'em.
Pick 'em.
Which is not favored, but the way Nebraska was last year at Minneapolis. That's been a hell of a place to go win. Nebraska, Michigan Huskers are dogged by 10 in Ann Arbor. They're dogged by 3 against Wisconsin at home. They're dogged on the road 2.5 right now. Early opening lines against Iowa.
That might be my looking at these lines.
Any lock of the year for me, Elijah?
Lock of the year, Nebraska plus 2.5 against Iowa.
You think so?
I'm curious to see what the total is going to be in this game, because kind of comes down to how Iowa's offense is, but their defense is going to be stingy. I mean, there could
defense is going to be great.
You're talking about Nebraska-Northwestern being a 9-6 game. I'm looking at Nebraska-Iowa as being a potential 9-6 game slugfest in Kinnick, cold weather November game. Like, that one's got potential to be very low scoring. So 2.5 points. There could be 2.5 points total scored this game. That could be the total.
Well, how's the wind going to treat you day after Thanksgiving? Is it blowing sideways and from all directions, or is it un-Black Friday like? Because it's been just cold and bitter like it's supposed to be in November. But it was funny. Nebraska's last win in Iowa City was the DeMornay-Pearson-L Superman game in the rally heard round Cornhusker land with Kenny Bell in overtime.
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy, incredible game, and that was a 37, 35, 34 shootout, which just typically doesn't happen. But Iowa was 4-8 that year as well.
I mean, it's almost felt like Nebraska's had bad luck against Iowa 3 consecutive years. Whenever there's bad luck for 3 consecutive years, you go, maybe that's not luck. But
someone making a play in the clutch.
But I'll say Nebraska has put in a good enough performance to win probably 3 straight years against Iowa, despite the fact they haven't gotten it done. So 2.5 points, Nebraska is an underdog against Iowa. I like that one because, I mean, if you go 4 straight years being a team that can beat Iowa and you end up falling short, like it means bad things for Nebraska. There's going to be a new coaching staff in Lincoln if that does in fact happen. So I like Nebraska plus 2.5.
So you're pulling the trigger. You're taking the points. That's your lock. That's that Nebraska will cover the number 2.5.
That's my lock.
Okay. You're saying it's Nebraska, Iowa.
I mean, do you see the only other lock I can see is potentially Nebraska 12.5 point favorite against Indiana, because I think Indiana is going to be terrible this season.
It's a pick'em.
Nebraska's a 12.5 point favorite.
It's a pick'em against Purdue.
Pick'em against Purdue. Yeah.
You know, I don't have a lock. Call me a chicken. Say what you want. That's okay. But let me see Northwestern first. I think my lock is that Northwestern covers the 12.5. If you're on the horn, stay there. We're going to wind down hour 1. Hail Varsity Radio is presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Coming up, Jeremiah Searles, Gary Barnett next hour. We'll get to your calls next as we get you into this second hour. Hail Varsity. You can email the show, Chris@HailVarsity.com.
Now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Todd emails in, Chris@HailVarsity.com. We're talking cars. And Elijah getting a ceremonial Ferrari model to give him credit for the Magnum PI mustache. Todd says I'd have to go with the Plymouth Fury in Christine. If the wife won't stop hollering at you, just pull over and offer to run in for some cold drinks and wait patiently.
Christine's the car that murders everyone, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Haven't seen it.
Yeah, my dad showed me that one. It's a good looking car though.
Yeah. It's a good name. What's your car's name? Fury. So there we go. Jim's with us on the line real quick before we wind down this hour. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, Schmitty, I just want, I'm kind of an old guy, but, that the old comment from Barry, which he respected Nebraska greatly and Tom respected Oklahoma greatly, but the old Sooner Magic thing, you know what Barry said all the time? It's not good. It's not Sooner Magic. It's just good ball players making a play.
It's a player making a play. Barry's kind enough to be with us on a couple of times a year, and once in a while we'll drift into Sooner. We'll drift into.
I mean, he knew it was just good ball players making a ball play.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and they made it more times than not in crunch, be it the hook and ladder or the field goal at the buzzer. Jim, thanks for the phone call, bud. Appreciate it.
You betcha.
All right. Yeah. No. Yeah. It's Old Barry does get ticked if you insinuate that they found a nut. You know what I mean? They made a lot of plays. Keith Jackson and the push-up. You want to get Dolman crazed? You tell Dolman that Keith Jackson did not push off in 86.
I'm going to write that in my notes for when we talk to Dolman tomorrow.
You just tell him and say, what a play Keith Jackson made. And you get the whole state up in arms.
I'm going to text myself that right now so I do not forget.
In the system, there should be something about Barry because he's walking off the field after the 86 game, the all-red game. Nebraska wore all red. And there's 20,000 fans in the stands. And Barry's got his state patrolman flanking him. Mm-hmm. He points up to one of the end zones as he's walking out. And the 20,000 Nebraska fans, hearts ripped out, thought Barry was pimping them a little bit. So you have to find that for tomorrow. And they all give him the bird at the same time. 20,000 Nebraska fans telling Barry's number one. And he's like, I wasn't messing with him. I couldn't believe that we won that game. And they thought I was giving him hell before I got on the airplane to head back to Oklahoma. It's pretty good. Well, I can't wait to talk to Barry during Nebraska-Oklahoma week.
That would be great.
I hope he's coming up. Maybe he can help me with Gertie the German Shepherd.
Maybe he can bring some of that wine.
No, I know. He was a little COVID afraid last year, which I totally get at 85. So he waved from the field. Him and the boss were hanging out. But no, well, I can't wait for Oklahoma week. But first things first.
I can't wait for Northwestern.
I gotta bring a vat of true Guinness back.
Oh, a little trade, some bartering.
Well, trade
some Irish Guinness for the Barry wine.
No, I want to keep both. we may need both this season. Jeremiah Searles, Hour 2 on the way.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Back into it, Hour 2. We kick off Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Time for Jeremiah Searles to join us. Standout Husker, longtime NFLer at Searles71_HSKR. Searles, what are you doing? You just blew out some birthday candles. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's been too long since we talked. Appreciate you having me back on.
Well, was it ice cream cake? Was it regular cake? I mean, talk to me here.
It was venison burger. I wanted venison burger with sweet potato fries, and the wife came through in a big way.
Man, venison sounds pretty tasty.
I just went and put out my deer cams today, getting ready to shoot some more deer this fall. And man, these cool mornings got me itching a little bit. I'll tell you that. The season is close.
Why the venison as opposed to the beef, though? What about it makes you go, yeah, I want a venison burger instead of a usual beef burger?
It's superfood, dude. Venison, elk, deer. If you eating something that runs away from predators as a living, it's just stronger for you. You ever been to a cow farm? Those things aren't moving anywhere real quick. You eat deer, you eat elk, you eat wild game, something that has to survive on its own. It's just that much better for you.
Searles starting to sound like the Liver King.
No, he is. I mean, it's outdoors Searles all the time. He's gonna put on the Arnold Schwarzenegger Predator camo and go to town. So before you guys would take on the Buffs, true or false, you would have a buffalo or a bison pot roast.
False. I wish I would have, but I did used to eat steak whenever we play the Longhorns.
Okay. Yeah. Just doing one of Bevo's relatives. I get it. Husker football. I got to get your thoughts here on the O-line, what you're hearing, what you're seeing, and just feel. You've been a part of lines where you were the new guy and you had some vets around you. You have some vets on this line couple of guys, right? But you've also got guys that may have been in the program long, but they don't have a lot of career starts. How are you feeling about that O-line going into this year?
To be honest with you guys, I'm a little shaky. When you look at an O-line, you always want to look, okay, who are your returners? Who are your guys that were contributors last year that are coming back? And when you look at it, you go, okay, well, originally it was going to be Nuri, then now he's gone. And so you're really like, okay, Trent Hickson is someone that I've heard has had a surprisingly really good camp because there wasn't super high expectations coming in for him to the camp. But I've heard good things for him, and then you look at the tackle positions, and I think that all of us have to get a little careful of anointing Teddy Prohaska king here. In my opinion, he's still a freshman in my eyes. He had one start and half a game against Michigan. And, I think that he's going to have some growing pains this year, but I think the upside for him is very high. You flip it over to the other side, you got Bryce Benhart over there, who had his struggles last year, but he has played 2 seasons now. He started a lot of football games. It's kind of time for him to make or break type of year for him. And then you look at Turner, who my guess would maybe move to guard now with Nuri being out, and he might move inside. And then, some names that have kind of popped off, that one name specifically is Kevin Williams. A guy that I heard is having a really good camp, raising a lot of eyes. So you're starting to see some depth pieces, but I'm still not 100% sure that we know who our starting 5 is right now, which is a little concerning. It's not alarming yet, but it's concerning. I think that we're still trying to find out not necessarily who the best 5 players are, but who the right 5 guys are to put out there on Saturday. And that's going to be a huge make or break for this entire football team, especially when you're going up against a front like Northwestern, who's going to be very disciplined. But, it's a little shaky for me, Schmidt. It's the one position on the offense right now after seeing a practice and kind of seeing how things were going that I'm a tad shaky on.
Jeremiah Searles with us, Hail Varsity Radio, our favorite Husker O-lineman and former NFLer. So that's a fair point. I want to get your thoughts on Benhart, because he's been through it. He's had to adjust. He's had to adapt. He's had to work. And it sounds like he's doing better. Time will tell with game speed on that. And he's also seeing some dudes off the edge, through fall camp. Has it been fair to Turner or Teddy just asking him to play this early? I mean, that's the option, but there's really not been anyone in front of him, Jeremiah. I mean, is that difficult?
Yeah, extremely. I mean, the O-line is a position, and I know I played early, but I'll even be the first to tell you, I wish I didn't play till my 3rd year. I think that when you get a chance to really develop and be in a developmental program from 18 to 20 years old and change your body composition and change the way you move and lift the right way, that's how you develop. And then you get on the field and you're more of a polished product versus more of and a lot of guys do it, the baptism by fire route, where it's like, hey, physically you might not be ready or strong enough or whatever it is, but you're talented and we need you. And that's kind of what happened with Turner. It's what happened with Benhart even, and it's what's happening with Teddy. And that's just a tough thing to do. And it really just shows kind of the lack of depth that we had at that position. And honestly, that we still have a little bit, where you wish that you have a stable of horses where you have guys that come in and you're like, listen, you're going to sit for 2 years and develop in the weight room and through the practice field and through reps there before you get a chance to compete. Now, if you're physically ready and you're gifted enough, then yeah, sure, let's roll. But, I think some of the struggles that these young guys have had is just because physically they weren't ready for Big Ten football.
Jeremiah Searles is with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Searles, now you got a group of guys that they do have experience in the Big Ten, and they've kind of taken their lumps, and it remains to be seen whether they're going to take that next step. But something we were talking about yesterday on the show is how crucial it is to have a guy on your offensive line that's kind of a leader of the offense as a whole, as well as the offensive line. So have you seen that guy or a couple of guys emerging? Did you know who the leader of the offensive line could be in 2022?
I don't. I'm not sure who that guy's going to be. I think that the easy answer needs to be Turner Corcoran. I think he's a vocal guy. I think he's a guy that he stepped up to the plate multiple times last year at the press conferences and took the arrows and took the bullets for some of the O-line woes last year. That goes a long way. I think that Trent Hickson is a guy that in the center position, you obviously command a lot of respect and leadership just by the nature of the position. But also he's a guy that, if you look back at his career, he started an entire season. He got benched, but he didn't whine. He didn't complain. He didn't transfer. He didn't do any of that. He just put his head down and kept working and kept getting better, and now he's getting his opportunity. And if you're the center and you go out there and you perform well, people are going to naturally gravitate to you being that leader. So I think that between those two guys, those are the two guys that are really going to have to step up and be the leader of that relatively young group.
Searles, are there any barometers for success you're looking for early in the season? I think an outsider's point of view might look at yards per carry or pressure rate or sacks to gauge how successful an offensive line is. But from an offensive lineman's point of view, what will you be looking for to say, yeah, this offensive line's getting the job done, or no, this offensive line isn't getting the job done?
That's a great question, Elijah. I think that the thing that I'm going to be looking for a lot is the amount of negative plays. And what I mean by that are 1st and 10, busted run play, now it's 2nd and 12, or how many, how the yards before contact is another one that you want to look at. Like, is the running back having to bust through the line of scrimmage while a guy's draped all over him, or is he getting to the second level before some guy's touching him? The negative plays and the yards before contact are two things that I'll monitor closely for gauging success of how an offensive line is. And then obviously the sacks are another one, but one thing that's easier to look at is pressure rate, right? Like, not just sacks, but how often was the quarterback's throw affected by pressure in his face? It doesn't have to be a hit. It doesn't even have to be a sack, but it could just be there's a free hitter, and so we had to rush the throw instead of letting the routes truly develop, and maybe we had to go for a short check down versus the long over route that takes an extra second or two to develop was going to come open, but we weren't able to throw it because there was pressure in his face. So those are the kind of the three barometers that I'll look at for an offensive line's performance on if they're doing well or if they're struggling.
Jeremiah Sirles joining us, Hail Varsity Radio. Sirles, a thought here with the running back room, what you've heard and seen pairing with this offensive line, getting downhill, more aggressive, moving people, that type of philosophy from Raiola. Do you think you've got a good pair, the O-line in their run game, their ability to run block with somebody in the backfield, a la what you guys had with Amir?
Yeah, that's one of those. I think that's the room right now that I think has a true stable of horses in it, which is great. I mean, you talk about a guy last year, Amir Johnson, who really came on the scene. You got Grant. You've got Gabe Irvin, who's going to be coming back. And then they've got this young, and you got Yant, who's just a power back. But I'll say this A.J. Allen guy is really intriguing to me. I got a chance to watch him run a little bit at the scrimmage, and he is extremely naturally when he's running the football. He's just, his jump cuts, his vision for a young player is a guy that I'd love to see him be able to redshirt and develop, but he's almost one of those guys we talk about talent-wise where it's going to be like, man, how do we keep this guy off the field? So that's a room right now that there's a lot of guys, and from what I've heard coming out of camp, there's really no clear starter right now at the running back room, which is not necessarily a bad thing. If you've got so many guys and no one's been able to truly separate themselves, that means the competition's tight, and that means there's a lot of really good talent. So, I think it'll be a little bit of running back committee by committee as the year starts. I think Gabe Urban won the starting job last year, so it might be his to lose. And if he's healthy and he looks great, sweet. But I think there's going to be a lot of guys that get some meaningful reps and meaningful carries early on in the year and see what can happen.
Searles, without giving away state secrets, were you pleased with what you saw at the scrimmage?
Yeah, I was pleased, and it was just a scrimmage, but the things that you look for as a coaching side from the scrimmage, there's clean operation. There wasn't a lot of pre-snap of penalties. There wasn't a lot of defensive holdings, and there were referees there. So I think that those were the kind of the things that I look for in a scrimmage. You don't necessarily look for the X's and O's because you're mixing and matching guys and you're still evaluating guys. And so I wasn't looking for that as much as how the operation of everything went. I thought it looked fairly clean, which is a good step in the right direction coming to the fall.
Searles, but with game prep for Northwestern still upcoming, if there's problems within the scrimmage, how much time does the coaching staff have to fix those issues? Are they reaching a point of fall camp where now there's a time crunch of trying to get your team to play clean football, but also knowing we're going to have to start devoting time in practice to actually preparing for the teams on our schedule?
Yeah, this is the week where you start kind of ramping down the training camp piece and you start kind of ramping up the game prep piece. We play a game here in 20 days, right? So I think that right now you still have that competition for trying to vie for your two deep, right? Your starters and your second level and your travel squad. There's still that inner competition, but now the reps may stop being ones versus ones, twos versus twos, three versus threes, where you'll still have certain periods that are good versus good. But now you're going to start adding more periods of, hey, our 1s versus Northwestern, our 2s versus Northwestern, and then maybe there's a 9-on-7 or a 7-on-7 or a team run period that's still good on good to keep that high level of competition, that high speed of going back and forth against each other. So there is kind of a yin and yang to it. But right now, by this point, Elijah, you really should be playing clean football. It's just the norm. There shouldn't be an emphasis on it anymore. It should just be the standard. And I think that that's something that this coaching staff has harped on for a long time, going all the way back to last year. And you just have to hope that as players, you police yourselves with that. As coaches, you're kind of hoping that the players just handle that, because that's the starting block of a good football team.
Searles, do you have high hopes for the defense? Have you been impressed from that side of the ball?
You know, I have high hopes because I think Eric Chenander is a phenomenal defensive coordinator. But I, again, am uncertain because you have a lot of new faces and a lot of people that are not necessarily unproven, but are unseen to the Blackshirts, right? You haven't seen them in this crimson and cream, or not crimson, excuse me, scarlet and cream on Saturdays, right? You haven't seen what they can actually do when the bullets are flying. And there's a lot of talent back there. I mean, the guys like Tommy Hill and Blackson Clark are fighting over there for that cornerback position. And you've got new guys in the back end. You've got new faces for rushing the edge, right? You got the kid out of TCU. You got the kid from Tech now. You got the kid from Bama that have all transferred in that you have high hopes for. But until they go out and prove it on Saturday, all it is high hopes.
Searles, I want to look ahead to Northwestern here just briefly before we get you out. How important do you think it is for Nebraska to be winning that first quarter and to go into halftime with the lead in terms of getting momentum going the right direction for a season? I mean, Husker fans would love to see a one-score victory for Nebraska in game one to try to, kill that curse, if you will. But how important do you think it is for Nebraska to get the momentum going early and go into halftime in Dublin with a lead?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, the first game of the year is the tone setter for the entire year. I mean, we all walked out of Champaign, Illinois last year kind of going, oh, expletive, right? Like whatever expletive you want to enter there. And it was kind of like, oh, here we go again moment. And it was week 0. I mean, it's such a momentum building game. And I mean, from the word go in Illinois, it kind of felt a little shaky. So you're absolutely right. You want to get in and you want to put the foot down. But let's not forget, Northwestern's not going to forget what Nebraska did to them under the lights last year. They embarrassed them last year. And this is a disciplined football team. Pat Fitzgerald is one of the most respected coaches, that his team is disciplined and they don't beat themselves. And they're going to be ready to go too. And, so I think it's really important that we can get a little bit of a lead so that we're not relying on all these new faces on offense, from the quarterback position to the receiver position to the O-line put in a position where they have to pass block a ton, but where we can really call and control the game from the way that Nebraska is going to want to control the football game.
Searles, will Sue look good in purple? Is that a possibility? Vikings and Indomitian.
It is. If the old Ziggy Wilf and them up there want to open their checkbook, I think he'd look real good in purple.
Old Ziggy. Yeah, he's got a checkbook, though, doesn't he? I mean, it's a nice checkbook.
It's big, too. He's got a big old billfold. It doesn't matter how many zeros he wants to put behind the check behind Sue.
There he is, Jeremiah Searles. Follow him on Twitter at Searles71_HSKR. Jay, we'll get caught up again soon before kickoff. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely appreciate it. Go Big Red.
Good stuff from Searles. Previewing the O-line thoughts as camp moves forward. Gary Barnett will talk quarterback development with us and maybe a little barbecue. Danny Burke, VSiN Sports, his takeaway with the early lines out on the Big Red. Hail Varsity continues, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Coach Gary Barnett with us, Hall of Famer with Colorado and Northwestern, also Missouri. And, Coach, you sent quite a pic/video from your weekend adventure with some incredible ribs on the grill. Those were fantastic. Thanks for leaving me a plate, Coach.
Well, let me tell you, there's 2 left in the refrigerator. I can overnight them to you, but I think you're better off doing them on your own. So,
well, they were just incredible. What kind of sauce did you put on them? It doesn't look like you're a heavy sauce guy, but just enough to get a taste.
Yeah, well, I've got there's one of the grandkids that likes a lot of sauce. One doesn't like much. Then, I usually always rely on Sweet Baby Ray's original.
Good work.
That just seems to take care of everything. And I do like experimenting, but it's just sometimes when you have to be right, you just got to go back to Sweet Baby Ray's.
No, absolutely. I had both propane tanks go out Monday when I was trying to grill for the family. So about halfway home, yeah, right. So you thought I had enough to grill for a steak, a pork chop, and a chicken breast. And about halfway home, it's like, nope. So I had to turn the smoker on and crank it up to about 400. But it worked out. Some of my finest work, I'll say, with junior steaks. So it's a good thing that I could go to the bullpen and get the smoker going. But I felt like an idiot. I just got that look like, what, you're telling me both tanks are out, you idiot? I'm like, yeah, both tanks. The fire pit tank's out. The grill tank is out. So,
we all do the same things. We go down to the very edge, the very bottom, just one more, and then I'll fill it, right?
Yes.
At least you do too. My wife keeps telling me, get another tank so you don't have this problem. Yeah, I sort of like the game of playing it,
Oh, man.
going right to the edge.
I got most of the summer out of it. It finally got me. Last time it happened, there was a tornado in the backyard. I kid you not, and I was still out grilling. So at least I've wised up there. Gary Barnett's with us. Coach, a lot to get into with college football, and it's been interesting just listening to Coach Whipple tell it like it is. It wasn't a good day for the offense yesterday. But overall, he's been pretty pleased, and wanted to get your thoughts. What was your approach, your philosophy when it came to working with quarterbacks? How hard on you? How hard were you on kids, or how? I don't want to say gentle, but what? Tell me what you did to drill your point across and get the most out of them. And I'm sure it depended on what quarterback personality you were dealing with. What was that fine line you had to walk?
Well, you're exactly right. It just depends on the personality of the kid, and you've got to figure out early on just how and the best way that they accept and take criticism or take correction. And that's, to me, that's the fine line of being a coach. That separates out the really good ones from the other guys that are just going to yell and scream. And young guys usually want to yell and scream. But each guy's different. Joel Klatt, for example, was an older guy. I mean, he was 21 when he showed up as a freshman. And so, he had already gone through 3 years of, having somebody watch every pitch that he tried to hit and every grounder that he didn't field. And so he was sort of, it didn't really make any difference what you said to him. He was fine. And what I found with Joel was, I just had to bench him to get his attention every once in a while. And, that's all it took. I remember with Darian Hagan, we're down on the field one day, and Mac, and he threw a bad pass, and I just walked over to Darian and I just said a few little words of just what. No, really. All I said was, here's what you got to do next time. And Coach McCartney heard me. He says, "Is that all you have to say to him?" And I said, "Yeah, that's all you got to say to him. Other guys, you got to get right in their, in their clock." And so it just depends. Every guy's different. And what I used to do was have all my coaches do a questionnaire with their players and ask them what's the best way to coach you, and before we ever started. And some of them were very accurate, some of them not so much, but for the most part, kids will tell you. I mean, if a kid doesn't care if you yell and scream at him, then he'll tell you that. And another kid just says, "Just pull me aside, don't embarrass me in front of people," or things like that. So then that's how you go about coaching them. And so every kid's different, and the key is knowing the differences between each kid.
Gary Barnett with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, what type of coach do you think, or do you know Coach Whipple is? How does he approach it? He seems pretty gruff and direct. So, and that's not, slamming him. I mean, that's the sound we get. And he's able, I mean, track record wise, I mean, he's been able to coach a lot of really good quarterbacks.
Well, coaches tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Whip would fall right into that category. You're there, the first meeting you have with a kid, you say, look, the attitude I want you to have is teach me, coach me, take me where I can't take myself. And that's what you're there to do. So there's got to be that understanding that that's the way our relationship's going to be. And I would always tell a kid when I was in his home, he says, I'm going to coach you like your dad, not like your brother. So, you got to keep lines of communication open. Everybody's got to feel, understand that we're trying to go somewhere. We're trying to get better. I'm trying to make you a better player. And here's how it's going to take place. And as long as you're on the same page, and as long as when you leave that meeting or in that discussion, you say, now, what'd you hear me say? And then, you find out whether or not they heard you say what you wanted them to hear, or if you somehow miscommunicated. And if you did, then you got a chance to fix that right now.
Gary Barnett with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, at what point would you panic as an offensive coach if the offense wasn't performing? And I ask that when it comes to the inconsistencies at this point, about halfway through camp. What do you feel like an offense should be doing? Should there still be some inconsistencies? And I know Nebraska's a different animal just because of the new faces and the new coaches, so it's really a different deal.
There's going to be inconsistencies all year. It's just not it's not something you just put together like a well-oiled machine and it works until it doesn't. But there's going to be inconsistency. You're dealing with young people, and you're dealing with moving parts, and the guy across from you isn't doing what he did last time, and so you have to adjust. And he's getting better, so you better get better at this or that. So it's always going to be that way, and you're just always fixing things. And everybody understands that as you go through it. It's just a daily process. It's fluid, and you've got to adapt every single day, and every single game's different. So that's just the business. It's the process of education.
Coach, quarterback run, read option, part of that was at the open portion of practice. I don't know how much that'll be a part of the Northwestern game plan, but guess what? We're talking about it, and it's out there media-wise, so maybe it's something Northwestern has to think about. In your time knowing Whip, do you think that is something that he will implement or use? Do you think the quarterback run portion of the offense is still a reality for Nebraska in 2022?
I think it's too valuable not to always have it available. And you've got to practice it in order to have it available when you want to use it. And you may go into a game plan and not even have it on your play call, but you always have it there. You've always practiced it. And there's just times when that play is such a good play. And yeah, it's a little bit risky with your quarterback. But if you don't practice it when you need it in a game, in a key situation, then you're not going to be any good at it. So that's just one of those plays that everybody has in their arsenal. It's like a quarterback sneak now. So you've got to practice it, and you got to have it ready. It may not be an integral part, but it is always there as an emergency backup.
Gary Barnett with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, we'll let you get out on this. Wanted to ask you, who's the one game wrecker that stressed you out the most? The defensive personnel on the other side of the ball, either pass rusher or corner or linebackers, or somebody in your coaching career that you remember making you or your offense nervous leading into a game?
Well, I can tell you when I was a coordinator for the national championship game, we were playing Notre Dame. They had two players. As I broke down all the film, and every time there was a turnover or a disruption, it occurred with two guys, Steve Stonebreaker, their linebacker, or they had a great corner. I'm missing his name.
Todd Light.
And Todd Light. And so every interception, every fumble, somehow those two guys were involved. And so I did not call a single pass play towards that corner, not one in that entire game. And not that we had a lot, but we were not going there. And we were going to go. We had a plan for Stonebreaker, and we went into the whole game with that mindset. And to me, when you look at the stats, and there's one guy that's got all the tackles for a loss and all the sacks, then you have to have a plan for that guy. And it's easier when there's nobody outstanding. When it's all the same, that's pretty easy. But there's one guy, and not everybody's this way. Some people just say, hey, we'll block him, whatever. Well, I wasn't that way. This guy is not going to be the guy that causes us not to win. So that was my approach.
Gary Barnett with us. Coach, have a great weekend. Hit him far and straight, and we'll get caught up again soon. Thanks again for the time and the patience.
Sounds great, Chris. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Coach Barnett with us. Good stuff on the quarterback run and grooming that quarterback. That fine line of pushing hard and coaching up. Danny Burke, VSiN Sports Network, the early Nebraska lines. What's Danny think with the underdog and favorite role for the Big Red?
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you. Time for Burke's Best Bets with VSiN Sports Network. Danny Burke joins us at Danny Burke 5 and is where you find him on Twitter. Weekly and nightly, you hear him on VSiN Sports Network with the podcast and his daily show. Danny, we sent you some Husker spreads, early season numbers and point spreads. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, Schmitty. We getting closer and closer, right? We got a big trip coming ahead, not only for you and myself, but for the whole squad. So hopefully they can start off with a nice win and a cover. Yeah, no kidding. That 12.5 is still, dare I say, interesting against the guy named Fitzgerald over in Ireland, but that's neither here nor there. But as I sent you some numbers, and I sent them because Elijah found them. I think Elijah's trying to fatten his piggy bank. You have North Dakota and Georgia Southern, Oklahoma. You have the whole schedule, early lines laid out, and anything grab you, shock you, or make your eyes big as you look at some of these numbers. The Oklahoma game, you look at the Iowa, the Wisconsin matchups, Minnesota. A lot of tight ball games, a lot of single-digit numbers as either a favorite or a dog. I think the first one that stands out has to be the Oklahoma number, right? I mean, Oklahoma, we've talked about them in the past, and Nebraska almost beat this team last year with certainly, you would imagine, a lot better roster, or a roster that's more comfortable and probably had more of a rhythm. Now you get a new quarterback, new head coach, new system all throughout. So how is that going to impact an Oklahoma team now going on the road against Nebraska? And they're laying 4.5. I get why the number is where it is. I mean, Nebraska shouldn't really get that respect until they can prove it themselves. But man, the fact that they were able to keep it close last year and now everything that has come about this year, I feel like Nebraska's in a little bit better shape. And hey, maybe they don't win it, but maybe they can keep it within a field goal. So I would look to taking the 4.5 as of now if I had to bet something with that game. Another spot that I think is really intriguing is that Purdue matchup, October 14th. Look, if you think Nebraska is going to be a good team, if you think they're going to be the team that a lot of people perceive them to be, then that's a must-win game, right? You have to win that game against the Boilermakers. This is a team that I was actually just looking over, and yeah, you got Aiden O'Connell, who did have really good stats last year. However, a lot of turnover on the offensive side of the ball for Purdue. So we'll see if they can plug and play in that regard. And same thing with their defense. They lost some guys. So, look, that's a game Nebraska should be the favorite. And if all goes according to plan, you got to think the number is going to move toward their favor. And I could see them being like a 3-point favorite. But if you wanted to jump in early, and again, you think they can at least get to that point with, one loss at best, then yeah, you're going to get the best of the number at this point, because I think that's another game that Nebraska should win, and you can get a good advantage of it right now to pick up.
Danny, what do you make of those first two non-conference games with North Dakota and Georgia Southern? Both of them inflated lines. With North Dakota, we got Nebraska as a 28.5-point favorite. And then with Georgia Southern, Nebraska is a 26.5-point favorite. And those are some big lines, but Nebraska does have the talent advantage against those two teams. Is that something worth betting early, or is that something you're going to wait and see how that Northwestern game looks? Because I could see those lines moving either direction, but I don't see them staying at that around 4 touchdown mark, depending on what happens against Northwestern.
Yeah, honestly, seldom do I get involved in games that have that big of a spread. It really doesn't matter what sport it is, and not that other sports get that big, but the point is when you get a spread as big as that in whatever sport it is, that kind of causes some trepidation. Like even in the NBA, for example, if you're getting to like an 8-9 point favorite, to me, I see those big numbers and I go, I'm only taking the points or I'm staying away from it. But I think you make a good point. These numbers probably are going to alter based on what we see happen out in Dublin with Nebraska against Northwestern. If they can make a statement, cover against Northwestern, well, then the number's inevitably going to move in favor of the Cornhuskers. But if it's an uncomfortable win, like a lot of people are kind of perceiving, yeah, those could shift in probably a different direction. But even if they just get, I don't know, maybe like a normal win, they don't cover, but they win by 10, and it was a solid win, I still just don't know early on if it's something worth a play. Like, I don't want to lay 28.5 with any Nebraska team or any team for that matter. And even 26.5, I mean, still, when you get a game that has that big of a spread, like I said, I would either take it or I just usually look to get involved in the total, because if the spread's that high, the assumption is one team's at least got to score a decent amount of points. So maybe at that point, you can look for a team total surrounding the Huskers individually, and that may be your best course of action.
Now, Danny, I kind of want to dive into how Vegas works for a second, if you don't mind. I'm seeing Nebraska as a favorite in 7 of these games, plus a pick'em. Is that where that 7.5 win total comes from for the season for Nebraska's win total, whether it's over or under? I just want to know where that 7.5 number comes from. Like, which comes first, I guess? Is it the chicken or the egg? Is it the lines in the games, or is it that 7.5 win total and they kind of set the lines around that? Where does that come from?
You know, it really depends on the book which one they get set up first, and it depends where they get their lines originated from. It's kind of a whole backstory that could go for a long time, but again, depending on where you shop, that's where the origination is. But some books, they'll do like games of the year. I know out in Vegas, they'll do whatever premier game. If you look at Nebraska's schedule, say, for example, like Nebraska-Oklahoma, that's probably one of the first games that odds makers had their line set at. But for the most part, you're going to get the win total set first. You'll have an idea of where it's going to be with the schedule. You go, okay, they're probably going to be a favorite in this game, that game, and you kind of judge in your head how big of a favorite, and you could correlate to that, how much of a winning percentage they would have in that specific game, and then you correlate that again with the win total. And then you get more of the solidified lines later on once you kind of get an idea of the rosters, and just everything else that really goes into it. So usually it goes the win total, and then you get the individual game spreads. But you know what? A lot of books act on their own and do it unique ways. But most of the ones I look at do it in that order.
Danny Burke's with us. Burke's Best Bets, VSiN Sports Network. Let's talk some of the toss-ups. You mentioned Purdue. What do you like or dislike about Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska getting points in both those games at this point? Also, Minnesota, a tight one as well.
Yeah, again, if Nebraska ends up on the same path that I was just talking about to where they beat Purdue, I think that Nebraska-Minnesota game, instead of laying the spread, I'm someone who lays a little bit more to get the added security. I would maybe look at a money line play there for Nebraska. But again, we also got to see how Tanner Morgan's looking up to that point. Nebraska and Michigan is tempting to take the double-digit points. If you want to get involved with Nebraska as a dog, that could absolutely be a game to do so. Nebraska, Iowa, is going to be 50-50, but I think the Huskers take care of business against Iowa at this stage of how we're perceiving this team to be. The hope would be that you could get that number at 3 and then take 3 points with the Huskers. But I think Nebraska, honestly, at that point in the season, will have that game at a pick 'em, and Iowa will not be as good as that spread is leading everybody to believe. And then with Nebraska at home against Wisconsin, I mean, you guys know my thoughts on the Badgers. I took them under 9. I don't know if I'm going to take anything in that game or even have that strong of thoughts for that spot right now. And I don't want to say, you're taking Nebraska for everything, but man, I mean, some of these spots you just got to wait and see. And I think Wisconsin will be a big one, and Minnesota would be a big one to where you just have to wait till the week of it to really see and feel what kind of effort and skill level you're getting from these teams. But yeah, with the Iowa game, I would honestly like Nebraska regardless at whatever point in this season, unless, there's some insane injury. But ideally, you get 3. I don't think you do, though, because I think Nebraska will be perceived as a better team by the last week of the season.
Danny Burke with us, VSiN Sports Network at Danny Burke 5, Rush Hour, his show. Danny, thanks for the time today.
Hey, you bet, fellas. Take care.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at HailVarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time on a Thursday, it's Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and Elijah on the road tomorrow at the Hail Varsity Club in La Vista, right by, Embassy Suites, if you're just turning off I-80, and also Cabela's. So that's where you need to go see Elijah. He'll be on set and streaming tomorrow. Connor Clark in with him. I'm going to attend Coach Pierce's funeral tomorrow, so that's where I will be. And we're thinking of Jack and his family through his passing. But I'll be back Saturday morning for the weekend edition. Reminder to get buckled up. Coaches make substitutions during the game to get their best player on the field. Getting behind the wheel after drinking also demands a substitution. Sober drivers are the only choice. A DUI costs more than you think. This message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. Check the show out. Good stuff today as we kicked off with the Northwestern preview with college football news. Heard from Brandon Vogel. Great work by Vogues with the I-80 preview. His podcast on the Hurrdat Family Network you need to listen to. And we talked a little defense with him. Searles checked in hour 2. Jeremiah, thoughts on the O-line, what he's seen from camp so far. Gary Barnett on the quarterback spot, specifically the quarterback run element. Does that become extinct in 2022? And then Danny Burke kind of going over, previewing the early Vegas lines, Elijah, that we also spend some time on. I guess my lock of 2022, as we're 2 weeks out, is Nebraska not covering the 12.5 as it sits against Northwestern.
Yeah,
not much of a limb, not much risk. I just think Nebraska could win by double digits, but aside from last year, this thing's 3 to 7 points typically.
And nothing that Scott Frost has shown me during his time at Nebraska has shown me that Nebraska will come anywhere close to exceeding expectations in week 1.
Just find a way.
I would argue they've fallen far short of expectations every single week 1 that he has been here.
Well, I'll say this. It'll be fun to be over and be a part of the Ireland experience, but getting ready for it, the week 0 part, the second year in a row. If you would probably take an unofficial straw poll of players, I think the players are probably jacked, but coaches, this is a freaking mess to try and get organized, get everything shipped, then go crush it on a time zone change in a foreign land. It'll be fun, but it's not quite the old kickoff classic or being down in Atlanta in the Peach Bowl for a neutral site game in a foreign country with a guy on the other sideline, Simon Fitzgerald.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what those Irish fans that turn out, what they think of the game. And I know football is a growing sport over in Europe and especially in the British Isles. So I'm curious just to see what kind of reception both these teams get in a place like Dublin.
Well, the NFL's done Germany quite a bit. They've done
London
Great Britain a lot. They've done Mexico. I think Germany is going to be new this year. Is that right? Or in the near future, couple of years?
They've had when they had the NFL Europe League, they had a couple
Sure.
teams in Germany. I believe this is the first time they're actually playing in Germany.
Okay. Well, we'll be back at you tomorrow at 4 from the Hale Varsity Club. Enjoy. Check the podcast out. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play with Hale Varsity Radio.